Hello all, and thank you for joining us today for our presentation on hazard identification. We've compiled several pictures from across our South Arkansas Lanxess sites where we've witnessed hazardous situations and conditions. These pictures are not meant to point fingers, but to bring attention to hazards that we can run into in our workplace every day. The warning signs are out there, but do you know what to look for? Throughout this presentation, keep in mind the areas in your unit that the hazard can apply to. And it's a choice we all make. Do we work safe or do we work unsafe, accepting the hazard? First, let's take a look at the hazard and risk tolerance model. I'm sure you've seen these hanging around the plants. This was created by Dave Fennell with the Exxon Mobil Company. The model shows us how our decisions and actions can put us at risk or create safe behaviors. When there is a hazard, do we identify it or see it? If we don't, we are at risk. If we do see it, do we understand the hazard? If we do not, we're at risk. If we do understand the hazard, do we accept it? If we do, we're still at risk. If we don't accept or tolerate the hazard, we show signs of safe behaviors. One of the best ways to start hazard identification is with our permit process. Our safe work permits and JSAs give us pointers to look for. During the permit walkthrough, take time to consider the 7 life criticals. Everyone involved with the task should participate in the documentation process. Complete a quality JSA listing out all the steps of the task. Identify all the hazards and put safeguards in place. Both Lanxess employees and contractors should have equal roles in this process. The next several slides will give you some ideas of the hazards that we should be looking for. There are many out there, and this video doesn't cover all that could be present in our workplace. We'll begin with PITs, or power and industrial trucks, and some of their hazards. Lanxess and other regulatory agencies require that all PITs be inspected before every shift. If there are any issues found with the PIT, it should be removed from service. No load can be left in the upright position unattended, and never operate the forklift from outside the cage. Always lower the mast and set the parking brake when you exit the forklift, and never park it on an incline. Our service contractors can also encounter hazards when working on our PITs. When we do the permit walkthrough, we want to talk to them about their body position while working on the mobile equipment. Our contractors' actions belong to us. We need to lay out the ground rules and talk about all pieces of the job while writing the safe work permit. Ask what tools will be used, and discuss about positions that they'll be in to work on the PITs. If there are ever any questions, stop and get answers before continuing. When we're setting up PITs for overhead tasks, there's several factors that we need to look at. Will we create pinch points or crush points? Will we block walkways? Are there electrical lines or other equipment above us or near where we'll be working? Will we have to move any other equipment that may be in the way? Or will you be working over another task? And finally, is the area barricaded? Although golf and work carts do not fall into the PIT category, improper usage could lead to hazards. They were not made to carry materials on top. If materials need to be transported to a work site, evaluate the weight and choose the correct PIT. If the cart's equipped with a bed, the weight carried should not be overloaded with tools, parts, or materials. And remember to clean out the bed of the golf cart or work cart at the end of every shift. We could create other hazards or damage with the loads we carry on the PITs. We could cause damage to walls or block driveways and exits. All entries and exits must remain clear at all times. Also ensure your travel path is clear of any obstacles. Chat, bolts, piping, and other materials can be shot out from under tires if they're ran over. Hazards can also be found in the areas that we operate the PITs. Whether it's on roadways or on earthen terrain, uneven surfaces can cause damage to forklift. Be aware of these areas, and if found, barricade the area off and be sure to put a work order in to have the area repaired. Next, we'll take a look at slips, trips, and falls. Hoses are the most common trip hazards in our units. We find them run across walkways, doorways, and stairs. We need to be careful when running these hoses through the unit. Look for the safest route. Can they be ran overhead or barricaded? And when you're issuing a safe work permit, point out these trip hazards during the walkthrough. And when you're finished with the hose, be sure it's stored properly. When running temporary hoses, determine the time frame they'll be in place. Sometimes these become permanent hoses. Can you route them safely without blocking doors, walkways, or stairs? Will they interfere with travel to an emergency equipment such as fire extinguishers or safety showers? Would it be safer to put hard piping in its place? Standing water can cause algae buildup, creating a slipping hazard. Take a few extra minutes to think about safely routing these hoses. Loose bolts and protruding studs can also lead to trip hazards. After a task, all bolts should be picked up and removed from the area. If a pump or motor or a beam is removed, the protruding studs should also be removed at the same time. If you find these types of studs inside your unit, they should be barricaded and a work order written to remove the hazard as soon as possible. Slip hazards can also be caused by chemical, water, and oil leaks. These leaks can become very slick and make it easy for you to lose your footing. When leaks are found quickly, the hazards can be eliminated. If leaks are found during the permit walkthrough, do not start the task until the area has been cleaned up. It's very easy to become distracted or looking overhead and not notice a slick area. An oil dry is a quick cleanup, but we need to have the cause of the leak repaired. To help prevent slip, trips, and falls, barricade the areas where work is being performed. Barricading is that visual reminder that there may be hazards in that area, and be sure to use the proper flagging for the hazard. Remember, yellow is for caution, red is for no entry. Only authorized employees should enter the barricaded area, and after the task is over, be sure to dispose of that barricading. Open holes are often overlooked. When piping or equipment is removed, a hazard could be left behind. All floor and wall openings must be guarded to prevent falls through the opening. Sumps and pits are often overlooked, and the grating can easily fall down inside the sump or the pit. And all grating must be properly supported to support any weight that would be on the floor. Next, we move to unguarded equipment. Pump motor shafts, fan blades, and moving machine parts must be guarded to prevent access by your fingers, hands, or clothing. Loose clothing and jewelry can become entangled in the rotating equipment. The guard should never be removed unless all the associated equipment has been locked out and tagged out. Our environment and the weather can play a big part in the life of the guard. If unguarded equipment is found, be sure to barricade the area and enter a work order to have the guard replaced. Fans, including wall or stand mount, must be guarded to prevent hands or fingers from touching the blades. Sometimes we get new equipment that may not come with the proper guarding. If you're installing new equipment, ensure there's no gap greater than a ½ inch. Pulleys with belts, hammer mills, and vibrators must also be guarded. Be sure to enter a work order for any missing guarding, and we may have to shut the equipment down until it's repaired. Hand tools can also present hazards. For each task, ensure you have the right tool for the job. Inspect them before use. Only manufactured tools should be used. We shouldn't have any homemade tools. If a tool becomes damaged during use, take it out of service and get a replacement before continuing. And be sure to list out each step that you'll do on the task on the JSA and to cover any hazards that may be present. There are many electrical hazards throughout our processes. In the MCC rooms, all electrical cabinets must be closed to prevent contact, and only qualified personnel should open the cabinets. All electrical equipment needs to be labeled, and the MCC rooms should be kept clean and orderly and should not be used as storage rooms. Outside in our units, all conduit should be sealed to prevent contact with electrical wires or water entering the conduit. If there are any bare exposed wires, avoid contact, barricade them, and enter the work order to fix. Our respiratory system is vital in our life. We could create hazards by not caring for our respiratory equipment. All respirators must be stored properly to prevent damage. Must be stored in a sealed bag and in a locker when it's not in use. Before using your respirator, be sure to inspect it for any damage. If any damage is found, contact the safety department for a replacement. Replace the cartridges after each use to prevent saturation. Remember that our PPE is the last line of defense we have for chemicals. And also know where your unit's emergency escape packs are and make sure they're in their boxes and ready to go. We can have many overhead hazards, and sometimes they're hard to see. Materials could be left behind in the pipe rack after a task is done and blown out by high winds. Scaffold boards, bolts, and even blind flanges can become bullets launched from above. Some tasks require work overhead, so be aware of suspended loads. Use a tagline for any materials lifted by a crane, and be sure to barricade the area, including the lifting path, so nobody walks into the area. Our body positions in which we work can create line of fire hazards. If we're working above or below ground level, it can also present hazards. Be aware of the equipment or piping that you're working around. Can it move and catch you in between? What is everyone else doing around you? Are you having to lean to the side off of a ladder to reach for something? Think about safer systems to use. Can the equipment or piping be restrained or scaffolding be utilized? When you see this type of hazard, what would you do? We can also create hazards with swing gates, ladders, and guardrails. All swing gates must remain closed to prevent falls through the opening holes. Along with our emergency equipment, the swing gate cannot be blocked or tied open for access to scaffolding. Guardrails are in place to protect workers from falls. They cannot be removed to run piping or any other equipment. Guardrail systems must have a top rail, a mid rail, and a toe board. When closing out your safe work permit, look at all the swing gates or guardrails that may have been removed during the task. During demolition or building new structures, it is important to remember the ladder access. We must control the access to the ladders that may be open at the top or missing standard protection systems. When the safety systems are removed, the ladder must be taken out of service and barricaded so it cannot be used. After it's blocked and barricaded, if it's not part of a demo or new construction job, enter a work order to have it removed. This is often overlooked and can be very hazardous. The housekeeping inside of our plants can be a huge hazard. Our areas around shops, storage sheds, and inside the unit need to be kept clean and orderly. Materials and tools need to be stored out of walkways and access doors. And when closing out a safe work permit and doing the level 1 PSSR, housekeeping needs to be looked at after the task is done. No emergency equipment can be blocked or anything stored on or in them. When we think about housekeeping, we need to keep in mind how materials are stored and disposed of. Ladders and walkways should not be used as temporary storage. Look for these types of tripping hazards as you make rounds through your unit. If you find them, remove them. And sometimes if you have a heavy object, you might have to get some help to lift it. When disposing of materials, ensure that it goes in the correct roll-off. If hazardous materials go into a general trash roll-off, the entire load becomes hazardous. Last but not least on housekeeping, we need to remember our packaging areas. Our main goal is to keep all of our products inside the piping, hoppers, or tanks, and when a leak's found, a work order should be put in immediately to have the leak repaired. Package areas should be cleaned up at the end of every shift because some of the materials may be slick and cause slips and falls. Excess collections of powder and dust can create an explosive atmosphere. Look for powder buildups on the ceilings and railings. Sharp edges in our areas can create a cut hazard. In our corrosive atmosphere, over time metals start to break down and fall apart. Sharp edges could form on handrails, valves, pumps, and stairs. Identify these areas and barricade them and enter a work order to be repaired or replaced as soon as possible. If materials are showing outside deterioration, it's possible the inside may be doing the same thing. A cut from these types of metals could lead to an infection. Open-ended piping can create drip hazards. Products could still be trapped in the low spots or behind the liner. Over time, the product can make its way out. A lot of our piping is run overhead in pipe racks, and walking under this type of open-ended piping can result in the product dripping on a person. All open-ended piping should be blinded and removed from service as soon as possible. Up next is environmental hazards. All of our drums, buckets, and storage containers must be labeled to identify the contents. These proper labels help aid our resources during an emergency. Drums must be completely sealed when not in use, and our sample buckets must be dumped after each use. Use caution when dumping the chemicals out of the drums and buckets, and wear the correct PPE. After use of chemical containers, ensure they are properly disposed of in the correct dumpster. Environmental hazards can also be caused by chemical leaks. When leaks are present, there's a high risk for chemical exposure. When leaks are found, take quick action to report, clean up, and have the leaking equipment repaired. Strong acids can break down concrete and grading, creating trip or fall hazards, and each of our chemicals have reporting guidelines depending on the amount released. After a leak has been discovered and cleaned up, ensure that you dispose of all materials properly. Our different kind of waste can also propose hazards. There are many regulations on our waste materials at our sites. Universal and e-waste, electronic waste are two examples. Fluorescent bulbs are a universal waste. These bulbs contain mercury, and cuts from the broken glass can cause serious injuries or infections. Radios, printers, and computer monitors are examples of e-waste. Batteries must also be disposed of in the proper location. If you have any questions around disposal of hazardous materials, contact any of the members at the Environmental Department. As I mentioned in the beginning, our safe work permits and JSAs are key to identifying hazards. Our safe work permits and JSAs are used to authorize work in our areas and describe hazards along with how to remove the hazards. All persons and trades must be involved in completing the permit and the JSA. Do a complete and thorough walkthrough identifying any hazards in the area. Both forms must be filled out completely before starting the task. After the task is complete, you must do a post walkthrough to ensure the task is complete and ready to return to service before completing the PSSR. Now that we've covered some of the hazards that could be found in our work areas, we'd like to show you some examples of areas that had various hazards. They were identified and a plan was put into place to clean the area up, put everything into its own place, and apply identifying labels. Housekeeping creates a safe workplace where walkways are clean and all trip hazards are removed from the area. Control centers and products are easily identified and labeled. And when materials are stored properly, they're easy to find when needed. These areas show a strong ownership in creating a visual workplace. Helps create a safety mindset. And you see these lock boxes here are numbered and all the tags are present. The keys were numbered to match up the box. And below, a confined space label was applied in accordance with OSHA guidelines. All of our confined spaces must be labeled to visually warn an employee of the hazard. Signs are available in the storeroom or at the safety department. Taking a little time to clean up an area and making hazards visible create a safer work environment for everyone. Here, another hazard was identified during construction. This expansion project was planned, work began, and it was unexpectedly placed on hold. The tire mounting studs were sticking out of the concrete pad, creating an impalement hazard. PVC protectors were made and placed over the protruding studs to protect the employees. Taking a few extra minutes, looking over your unit to find and apply protection from hazards can prevent injuries. The choices we make play a big part in mitigating hazards. When this forklift operator picked up the load, it was too tall to see over. He chose to drive backward so he could see the path clearly. Driving forward with these types of loads is very hazardous. Your line of sight is blocked, keeping you from seeing objects or people in the path of travel. Take a minute to plan your path and the possible hazards that may be in the way. Our near-hit program is also very important to our work areas. It's a chance for us to share hazards that happen in your area. Not only can it benefit your unit, but the same hazard could exist in other units. It's an opportunity to fix the hazard and share so others can watch out for the same type of hazard. In this picture we see the removal of some old rail cars that were starting to corrode and fall apart. A near hit was turned in on the hazard, and around $100,000 was spent to remove the rail cars and make the area safe and more environmentally sound. Our voices should be strong when we spot hazards. Speak up and don't forget to use your stop work authority. What types of hazards are you willing to work around? What type of injury are you willing to accept? Unreported hazards or unsafe working conditions could lead to you or your co-workers being injured. Are you willing to accept that? We all have the authority to speak up and stop a job if it's unsafe. Take a few minutes to discuss the hazard and formulate a plan to remove it. There are no repercussions for speaking up. That's our commitment to you. And we can't become complacent. Complacency is extremely dangerous in our workplace. When we get used to things being the way they've always been, we no longer take notice of our surroundings. We can underestimate the risk of tasks that we perform on a regular basis, or fail to notice a change in our environment when we have become complacent in our daily routine. Constantly be aware of your surroundings. You know your areas better than anyone. Sights, sounds, pressures, they can all change in an instant. Do you hear or see them? Take ownership in your area and create a safe shift. Our families are all counting on us to come home safe every day. Our work behaviors are far-reaching and could have serious consequences if we do not work safe. Make the same safe choices you would want your loved ones to make if they were in your boots. Perform safe, be safe, and take safety home with you. Thank you for everything you do in working safely. Zero incidents is achievable if we only take a few extra minutes to identify the hazards and remove them from the workplace. I hope everyone has taken a little bit of something home from this presentation. I want to thank you again for taking time to watch this. Keep in mind these hazards. Be mindful of them every day. Watch for them and eliminate them before we start work.